Hey, Krista.
Hi, Barbara. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
I'm just here. Oh, today's my birthday.
Happy
I turned 21
birthday.
today.
Ooh.
Girl, I turned 21. I'm legal to drink. Ooh.
Oh, for me. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I know.
What
I'm
you doing
legal.
today?
Nothing. I didn't want to do anything.
You didn't treat yourself to a nice dinner or something?
Yeah, I treat myself to a nice dinner. I made it myself, but I've been drinking since 12 o'clock.
That's the only way to do
My kids wouldn't let me go to sleep last night. They was like, "Oh, it's your birthday." They was like, "It's half an hour more. It's 5 minutes, so you gotta be up." And I had a bottle of Bailey's, and and they was like, "Here, drink from the bottle. It's your birthday." So I put it to my head,
Oh my
and I
goodness.
went to sleep at 7 o'clock, and I wake up and I was like, "No, but we're gonna celebrate on Saturday."
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Oh my gosh. There's a lot of September birthdays. My birthday's in September too.
Yeah, I have
Oh,
my
Dr.
cousin
P
is
is
on the
here.
21st. My cousin is on the 21st. My brother, we have two brothers born in September, one on the 9th, the 7th, and one on the 29th. Then I have a couple of cousins that was born in September. Um, one on the 21st that's coming up. It's a whole lot of September people I have in my family.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
but
don't
I'm the
know what
best
it
one.
is. I don't know what
But
it is
yeah,
about September. Both of my parents are September babies too.
uh,
So crazy.
September people are the best.
You know it.
We're the best. We wear our hearts on our sleeves.
This is true. This
Yeah.
is true.
And that's why that's why we get hurt a lot of time. A lot of people hurt us, but it's okay. But I'm just
Yes.
happy to be alive. I didn't really want to do anything. What happened is because of COVID, broke the plans that I was making because I've been saving up since like December. So
Mm.
I was gonna have this big bashment or whatever because I turned 50, so I was like, I'm happy. And no, I don't
Mhm.
look it, but yes, I am.
Yes.
And I was gonna have this big thing, but because of COVID, I just put it off. But we're
Mhm.
gonna have a little, barbecue in the backyard or whatever, and but next year definitely I'm gonna do something. But I'm just happy
Yeah.
to be alive. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. That's all, I could really hope for and be happy for right now is my health because,
Yes,
you know,
yes,
you're really not guaranteed
yeah. Because one of my
every day,
classmates, I got a message on Facebook yesterday, and one of my classmates that I went to school with, me and her is the same age. She died of a heart attack on on um on Tuesday. So you know what
Oh,
I'm saying? So, and it breaks my heart. And we were real close. So for me to be here, I'm just grateful.
that's terrible.
Just
Oh,
so grateful.
yes, yes. That's, I try to take care of my vessel
You
as
have to.
much as I
No,
can.
yeah. And if you don't, nobody's gonna do it. So you have to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Yup, yup.
So you gotta do the best that you can. I mean, we sometimes you try and it doesn't work, but you got to do the best that you can.
Yeah. And also I I'm like bad at this, but keeping up with doctor's appointments too.
Yeah. No, but you know what? With me, I used to stress
And
because I have two teenagers. But
mhm.
I just learned to close the door because we only fight about them cleaning their rooms and stuff.
Mhm.
But now I just close the door and I don't even look in there, so I'm not gonna run up my blood pressure over nothing. I clean my house myself. I don't ask them to wash the dishes anymore. I bought paper plate and plastic forks. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I just close their door if they don't clean up their room, and I'm good.
I'm all for it because it's just like, with everything that everyone has to do every day, like dishes is really at the bottom of my
Exactly.
list. Like I don't want to stress about that.
Hello, ladies. Hi, Crystal.
Hi, Sonia. How are you?
Good to see you.
You too. Well, hear you. Hey. Hey, Ted.
Hey.
Let me
Oh wow, we've got
do a
Dr.
switcheroo. Yeah.
Okay, let me log in on my other two.
Oh.
Hi, Ted.
Hey Barbara.
Hola, Barbara. Hi, Ted.
Sonia, how are you?
Good, tired.
I know. I'm not tired. I'm excited.
I'm with you. I'm tired and excited.
Uh,
There's room for both.
yeah, well, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I'm a little of both. I didn't know if anyone was gonna show up.
Why?
Well, I don't know. Just the first time we've done a sort of a side meeting like this, you know, a committee meeting.
I just jumped off an SLT meeting. I did send out a reminder that I didn't realize I'm having trouble with my email, and it was sitting in a draft, but I sent it out anyway, so we'll see.
We have a bunch of people in the waiting room. I don't see our guest speaker yet, although she might be, and I guess there's a possibility she's one of the phone numbers that's calling in. I don't know.
Hi, Dr. Pate.
Maybe I should just let everyone in now.
Hi, how are you? I'm here.
I'm good. Oh, okay.
Good. Hello, everybody. Good evening.
Hi.
Hello.
Just feel like I just left you, Dr. Pate.
That's because we did. We've been
I know.
staring at each other all day today.
That's what.
Okay, I see a Maggie, so I'm gonna go ahead and let her in.
Let me
Let's hope this is the right Maggie.
Clean up a little bit.
And if it isn't, then you can remove them.
Maggie, is that you?
That is me. I'm going to turn my video on. Sorry. Hi.
Welcome.
Thank
Welcome. We have folks in the waiting room. We're just kind of just gonna. I guess it's already 5:30, so I'm gonna go ahead and let everybody in, and then you know we'll just admit all.
Sounds good.
Okay. Everyone has been admitted to the meeting, and I guess we'll just. And Maggie, you have a presentation?
I do. So what I think what makes the most sense.
I can't hear you for some reason.
Hold on.
Yeah, we better.
Is that any better?
We have technical difficulties. Better to get that handled now.
Can you hear me?
I think it's just you, Ted, because I can hear.
Hey, Howard.
Here.
We should definitely take attendance of CEC members.
I was just having some technical difficulties myself.
Can you hear me now, Ted? Sounds like everyone else can.
Can someone say something? I'm having trouble.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Hello.
Okay. Guess I'll just keep my headphones off. I don't know why they're not working right now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Right. Ed, can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah. I think it was my fault. So it must have been my iPad.
Okay.
Sorry. All right. I guess give it another minute or two, and then we can get started.
Sounds great.
Thanks everyone for coming. This is a great. I'm really excited to see everyone here. We were all unsure of since this is actually our first committee meeting, so where we have a speaker, so we didn't know how that would go. So this is sort of an experiment, but I'm glad to see that it's, we're getting a lot of turnout, which is great.
Ted, while we're waiting, I should have thought about this and asked before, but would it be okay if I sent you after the fact an evaluation form?
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
you just shared it with people and great.
Yeah, is it online? Like if you wanted to,
Yeah.
you could actually post it in the chat if you wanted to.
Oh, I can't because it's not online yet. I need to create one for this.
Oh, okay.
And
Sure. Yeah, if you want to just email that, and then we'll try to upload it to our website for people to fill out.
terrific.
Okay. All right, so I think we have Barbara and we have Howard, and I think that's who we have from CEC28 at the moment.
I'm gonna reach out to Erica, see if she's.
Rajwinder Kaur.
Great. And why don't we go ahead, if it's okay with the other committee members, why don't we go and get started? It's 5:35.
I think, Ted, I think we should welcome our D28 presidents and of course, our superintendent, Dr. Pate, first.
Sure, absolutely. So welcome everyone to our inaugural Equity Committee meeting for CEC28. And we're excited. We have a guest speaker. I see that we have Dr. Pate in the meeting, our superintendent. So welcome, Dr. Pate. And I see we also have Jessica Zillo and Shirley Albin from President's Council. There are wonderful co-presidents from President's Council. So welcome and thank you for joining. And I see a lot of other names that I recognize as well, but too many to name. So thank you everyone for joining. I think this is the topic today is remote learning and equity. And I think that's a topic that everyone has a connection to. And we all went through sort of this unexpected spring quarter, and we all had our own struggles, no matter who you were or what part of the district you're from and what your personal situation was like. I think we can all universally agree that we all struggled. And so I think that can really give us a lot of insights on sort of equity and what that might mean for students across the district, because I think the struggles may have been different depending on what people's family situations are. And I think that's one of the things I was hoping to learn today from Maggie Maraf. So Maggie Maraf, welcome. I guess you're the Special Education Policy Coordinator at Alliance for Children of New York. And if you want to just kind of introduce yourself and maybe we'll get started.
Sure. Thank you guys for having me. I am indeed the Special Ed Policy Coordinator at Advocates for Children. I'm going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint that I want to do. And give me 2 seconds. Ted, I think you have to allow me to share my screen.
Crystal, do we have this set up for screen sharing? Let me see.
Or I can send it to Crystal also, if that makes more sense.
Yes, it's set up for screen sharing. Just 1 second.
I have a share content button on my screen.
Maggie, you should also be able to, at the bottom it says share screen.
Yeah, when I do that, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, I just enabled screen sharing. Let's hope we don't get Zoom bombed.
Okay.
Yes.
Ted, I can also send you the PowerPoint if you'd rather do it.
No, you might as well. As long as everyone behaves, then we're okay. Worst case, okay. I can disable it. We'd have to do that.
All right. Give me a second then. Okay, are you all seeing that cover page?
Yep.
Terrific. Okay, I'm gonna take us through this, and then I will stay and answer any of your questions that I can. I am from Advocates for Children of New York. I set this, Ted and I talked, and I set this up as remote learning struggles and equity in New York City public schools. I'm actually gonna flip it and talk a little bit about equity in the schools, and then talk about some of the unique things that we're seeing right now around remote learning. This is my proposed agenda, right? I want to talk to you a little bit about who Advocates for Children is and why I get to talk to you about this. I want to share some data on the populations that we serve, talk about some key equity issues with regard to remote learning, and then open it wide up for you guys to ask whatever you want and me to answer whatever I can. Hopefully that works for all of you. So Advocates for Children of New York, we're a nonprofit independent agency, and all of our work centers around protecting the rights of New York City students. We are dedicated to protecting every child's right to an education, not just those low-income and vulnerable students that we work with. We do focus, however, on students from low-income backgrounds who are struggling in school or experiencing school discrimination of any kind. I have given you our website here, and if you haven't been on it in the past, you should definitely take a look and maybe join our mailing list. We send out a lot of information that you may find helpful. These are all of the different populations that we serve. So again, all of our work is centered around school and education here in New York, primarily New York City, but also New York State. These are done as overlapping circles because none of these populations stands on its own. So we work with students in early childhood and their families, obviously, students at the other end of the spectrum who are overaged for their grade level, students facing disciplinary issues, students involved in the child welfare system, students with disabilities, which is where my own expertise lies, immigrant students and English language learners, and youth involved in bullying incidences. As I said, there's a whole lot of overlap. So you could be a student with disabilities who is also involved in a bullying incident, or who is involved in the child welfare system. You could be all three of those. So we work very closely together, but these are our primary areas of focus. We do our work, we provide direct services to people a couple different ways. So forgive me for the brief promo here, but we have a helpline that we run 4 days a week, Monday to Thursday from 10 to 4. This is the number. I will also send Ted the PDF of this PowerPoint after tonight so that he can share it with you guys. We do workshops and trainings and basically for anybody who invites us if we have the ability to help out. And then we provide free direct legal services to low-income families. On our helpline, we'll talk to anybody and everybody that calls. If we're providing direct services, we do have income requirements that are roughly 1.5, 2.5 times federal poverty rates. In addition to the direct services, let me wait a second. In addition to the direct services, we also do policy work. That's what I do. And then we do large scale litigation work. And both of those, the policy work and the large scale litigation work, are completely informed by what comes into us through these three things on the screen right now. So all the families that we talk to, all the stories that we hear, that's all feeding into us through helpline workshops and the direct services we provide. On our website, if you take a look at it, we have a whole lot of AFC guides and resources. We're constantly updating it. We just posted today, we just updated in English, and hopefully by tomorrow we'll have it in Spanish. Every year, one of the things that I do is I create a multi-paged fact sheet for families of students with disabilities around issues that typically come up at the start of the school year. We needed to do some serious updating to it this year as a result of COVID-19. So it's up as of today in English. You can find it there, and it'll be up in Spanish I really hope before the weekend. We don't like to post things in English only. But there's things on all of those populations I showed you a couple of slides ago. We also have, you can sign up for our mailing list, and we send out electronically. And I believe we still send things out by paper, although I should confirm that now that nobody's in the office. We send out quarterly reports and statements. This was a special edition we did on literacy. You're going to notice tonight that I talk a lot about literacy because we think literacy is one of the biggest equity issues facing our students right now. Those students who learn to read when they're in school are going to get places that their peers who struggle with reading and never really master it don't get a chance to get to. I don't know what these red lines are. They must be me, and forgive me for that. We also put out a number of reports. I didn't take any snapshots of those, but if you sign up for our mailing list, you will definitely get a chance to see them. One of the other things that I do in my work around policy is I coordinate something called the Arise Coalition, which is a coalition of parents and advocates and academics and educators and any other interested stakeholders around systemic reforms to special ed here in New York City. So the goal is to improve the day-to-day experiences and the long-term outcomes for kids with disabilities in New York City's public schools. A lot of AFC's work is about all students with disabilities, including those at non-public schools. Forgive me. Arise's work is specifically focused on the public schools. I put this up here because we welcome new members always. We have a number of folks from a couple other CECs and from of the citywide councils who participate in Arise. And if any of you want to join us, I will give you my email address. When I stop talking, I'll drop that into the chat and you can just reach out directly to me. I'm going to stop there and see if you have any questions about what I just said. And then I'm going to give you some data points about who we serve and in that who New York City's public school population entails. So any questions?
Maggie, I would suggest going through the whole presentation and then we'll kind of, people will hold their questions for the end because, you know.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I will keep going then. So as it says here, a few key data points about our population. This is abbreviated and I wish I could take credit for it. I am not, to be in full disclosure, a data person, but we do have a really talented policy analyst named Sarah Part, and she prepared these for something else that we did. And with her permission, I'm sharing them with you today. So let me walk you through them a little bit. The percentage of students in grades 3 through 8, and I said I'm going to talk a lot about literacy tonight, who are reading proficiently, has definitely been rising over the years. We have a snapshot here from 2014 through 2019. Unfortunately, as those rates rise, the disparities based on racial lines haven't closed up at all. So we're still seeing certain populations outperforming Black and Hispanic students, which is long-term equity an issue. So at the same time, while the disparities between ELs and those students who were native English speakers and students with and without IEPs, so IEPs are the documents that students with disabilities have that lay out their special education supports and services, those disparities have gotten bigger in both of those instances. So again, some of the population we work with are English language learners and obviously students with disabilities. Racial disparities in four-year graduation rates have gotten slightly smaller. That's obviously good news. And graduation rates have increased across, sorry, I have something in my way, across the board. The students that we're looking at here are the students not that came in the middle of their high school career, but those who entered New York City public high schools in the 9th grade. So when I send this to you, if you want to spend a little time with it, I definitely urge you to do so. 20% of students in New York City's public schools have IEPs, IEPs being those special ed documents. What we have here on the right is a snapshot of how those break out for the most part. So you can see that the largest percentage of them are either learning disabled or have speech and language impairments. 70% of them together, those two groups, 29,000 students with disabilities, so 15% of those 20% didn't fully get their mandated instruction in the last year that we have data for. There's no current data for the 1920 school year yet, and we're entering now the 2021 school year. COVID has messed with my my timeline a little bit in my head. Only 53% of students with disabilities graduate in 4 years. The number is slightly higher if you look at those graduation numbers for 5 years. But the reason we use this is that we're comparing it to students who don't have disabilities. And there's a 30 percentage point gap between those two groups. Students with disabilities are disproportionately Black and Hispanic. They're also Ls and they're also boys, with a couple major things below. So on the left, the blue chart, that's all about the racial disparities in students with disabilities. The middle chart has to do with English language learners, and the third is the male-female balance. This is important because although things are changing, when I came to this work over a decade ago, graduation rates for students in self-contained special ed classes were disturbingly low. They were less than 5%. Just because a student is in a self-contained class does not mean that they can't learn. It just means that they need supports and services in order to get them there. And given the overrepresentation of Black and Hispanic boys, English language learners in those classes, it meant that we were sort of condemning those students to a much tougher route towards graduation, towards success in life. 13%.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but could you define a self-contained class?
Sure, sorry. Self-contained class is a class with only students with disabilities in it. So students with disabilities, and this could be a whole training, but students with disabilities can learn in any number of places, including general education, right? They may be in a gen ed class and get supports and services. They may be in an integrated co-teaching class side by side with students who don't have disabilities, or they may be in any one of several kinds of self-contained classes. Does that answer the question?
Yes, great, thanks.
Great, okay. English language learners, 13% of the New York City student population are new to English. They speak 154 different languages, and we've listed the top 5 here. The DOE actually has an obligation to put out key materials in the top 9 languages. 1 in every 4 English language learners has an IEP. So again, that's the special ed document. And only 41% of English language learners graduate in 4 years, and 26% of them drop out. That's really high. And really, really disturbing, and obviously has long-term implications for those students who drop out. 1 in 10 New York City students is homeless. Again, a whole lot of overlap with the homeless population, English language learners, students with disabilities. Only 29% of the students who are homeless or experiencing homelessness are reading proficiently. 61% graduate in 4 years. That's actually higher than for students with disabilities, but again, not all of these students are students with disabilities. 43% of them are chronically absent, which is a really important number given the way that New York City does transitions to middle school and high school. The city is looking at changing that formula right now, but absence and attendance at school goes into what schools look at when they consider the group of students that are applying to them. Students in foster care, we also have a whole project that works with students in care. 6,000 of our students are in foster care every year. They change schools often. The average amount of time that those students miss is up to 1.5 months of school each year. And when you think about the fact that we're pretty much talking about a 10-month school year, that's a lot of time. More than 50% of students in foster care have IEPs, and 16% of them, and only 16% of them, are reading proficiently. You're probably starting to see a pattern here with the reading and understand why we care so much about the literacy. A few more slides on data. So the number and average length of suspensions has dropped, but for Black students and students with disabilities, they continue to be disproportionately subjected to various exclusionary processes and discipline, which means that they lose key instructional time during those periods of exclusion. Also on this issue, the number of school-based arrests and summonses has been falling, more good news. And prior to the schools closing in March, the number of children in crisis interventions was also going in the right direction. But racial disparities continue, and they're big, really, really big. This last number, 58% of students handcuffed while in crisis last year were Black. Think about what that means to those students. Think about what it means to their long-term success in school. Think about what it means if they're being disciplined like this, handcuffed and taken out of school in cuffs, what it's going to mean in terms of their willingness to return to school. That's all the data I wanted to go through. I am really sorry about this little red squiggle. It's making me crazy. Hopefully it's not distracting you all as much. What I want to do now is sort of pivot and talk about what Ted really invited me here to do, which was talk about the obstacles that all of these students who were already facing obstacles are facing during this period of remote and hybrid, soon to be hybrid learning. COVID-19 has obviously exacerbated the divide between each of these groups and their peers, students with disabilities and students who don't have disabilities, students who are English language learners and their families. I want to talk about that because families are really key there. And students who came to school speaking English fluently already, students who are experiencing homelessness, those students in foster care, and those students with mental health needs. I'm going to take it one at a time. I'm going to start with students with disabilities, which, as I already admitted, is what I know best. School closing in March proved to be hugely, hugely problematic for our students with disabilities here in the city. They depended on school not just for instruction, but for a range of other specialized services and therapies, OT, PT, counseling, nursing services, paraprofessional support. All of those were jeopardized with the move to remote learning. The DOE has been running as fast as they can to try to catch up and provide those services. So I do want to recognize that. But I also want to point out just sort of how, essentially the way I describe it is that for typical students, the last 6 months have meant that they've been treading water and hopefully making some progress. For students with disabilities, they've been struggling not to go down with the tide. Without consistent services and a structured school day, our kids with IEPs and with disabilities fell behind their more typical peers. A lot of them actually lost skills. So it's not just that they stopped progressing, but they made negative progress or they regressed. Things need to change in some really significant ways this fall in order to make special ed work. Again, I know from frequent conversations with folks at the Office of Special Education that they are scrambling to work all of that out. I am going to drop after this because I can't figure out how to do it while I'm sharing my screen. I'm going to drop the link to a set of recommendations that Advocates for Children released a few weeks ago. Recommendations about ways to make learning more successful for students with disabilities this fall as students continue either to learn remotely or as they enter into this hybrid period of learning, or for a few students from District 75, which is New York City's citywide district for the kids with the most profound disabilities, they'll have the option of attending daily. But all of these, we believe, are key to success. Some of these in the past 3 weeks have already, we've already started to see them put in place by the DOE, some of them not so much. We will continue advocating on all of these points. But this is a really abbreviated version of a 15-page paper. So as I said, I'll give you the link. But we're urging the DOE to offer full-time in-person support instruction to the students in special classes. Those are the ones that Ted asked me about before, whose families want that option. So not necessarily requiring that all kids in specialized classes are in school every day, but if the families feel that their children, because of their special ed needs, need that option, then we feel that it needs to be an option. Obviously, improving remote instruction and service delivery. You all have been watching the news and probably experiencing things with your own children. It's, the ramp up period has been a tough one for those kids with disabilities. It's not just the instruction, but as I said before, it's the related services and the services like nursing and paraprofessional support. Deploying educators already trained in evidence-based literacy instruction to provide support to struggling readers on the days they're learning remotely. The city has been training for years. They've been working to improve literacy support for students with and without disabilities. And they've put into place 2 really key programs. One of them is universal literacy, where coaches are trained to support, okay. Really not sure what that yellow slash is now.
I think that's when I enabled screen sharing, it enabled it for everyone. So.
Oh boy. Okay. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Maggie.
Nope.
Ted, what I can suggest, I'm sorry, you all, just I'm interrupting. What I would suggest is you take away screen sharing and make Maggie a co-host. That way she can share her screen without opening screen share to the entire community.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Okay, and I think our account only allows 1 host, but what I'll do is I'll make you the only one problem with that is that we have to admit people from the waiting room. So
you know what? Let's just live with the squiggles.
Yeah.
I see that the yellow ones disappeared already, so I think we can do it, and I'll send you a clean copy for people to have after.
All right, great.
Okay. So the universal literacy coaches have been trained and continue to be trained and supported to support staff at schools, early childhood, kindergarten through 2nd grade, in the development of literacy skills. There are also IEP teachers. So the universal literacy coaches are supported out of the Division of Early Childhood. The IEP teachers are supported out of the Office of Special Education. One of the key jobs of the IEP teachers is also to support literacy development. They work directly with students instead of coaching educators. Our recommendation here, and one that our executive director wrote a op-ed in the Daily News in a few weeks ago as well, is that those people be used during this period of either remote or hybrid learning to provide direct literacy support to even greater numbers of students. Also recommending that the DOE hold meetings with parents to develop individualized education plans prior to the start of the school year. The DOE is rolling out plans right now to develop or to create documents called PADS, and I need to, programs adaptations documents, which are going to be, so for those of you who were familiar with the remote learning plans for students with disabilities last spring, These are going to be sort of the new, improved, more updated versions of those, but they're going to be the plan for delivering special ed services to the students wherever they are learning from. We definitely have some recommendations around them, but it's good to see them rolling out now. Providing behavioral and mental health supports to all students who need them. Refraining from police interventions and limiting exclusionary discipline. Ensuring that all health and safety protocols account for the unique needs of students with disabilities. Masks, for example, might be difficult for some students with disabilities. Many students with autism are really concerned about having something over their face, same with social distancing. So figuring out sort of how to work with those students and make accommodations for those students at the same time as ensuring that all of the students and all of the teachers and all of the providers and all of the families that the students are going home to stay safe. Providing compensatory services. So that's not necessarily about the in-school experience now, but for those students that lost time and important learning and important skills, we want to make sure that they get those made up at some point soon. And ensuring that the Learning Bridges programs, those are going to be the community-based centers, are able to provide support for students with disabilities. There will be students of all natures there, including students with disabilities. We've also recommended expanding eligibility in those centers to students above 8th grade. Currently, they're only for students up through 8th grade under the presumption that older students can be more independent on their own. That's not necessarily true for many high school age students with disabilities. It is for some, it is for many in fact, but it isn't for all. And it's, you know, there's a spectrum of ability and disability. And for those kids on the higher need end of that spectrum, we want them to have a place to go if they need to during the days they're not in person in class. Another key equity issue that we see, and I'm sure you all have experienced this, is around access to technology. So not just for students with disabilities, although there are special considerations for kids with disabilities around assistive technology, but this is sort of bigger picture, all students. So by now, most of the students have some form of technology. They didn't in March when we started, but the DOE has continued to provide iPads to students who required them. There may be some switching up as students transition from elementary to middle and middle to high school, and new schools require different, have different technology needs. But the larger issue that we continue to see is around connectivity. Having the iPad is great and you can do work on it, but you also need to be able to, even if you are an in-person student this fall, much of your time will be spent learning remotely. So you need to be able to get online. You need to be able to do your work online. You need to be able to watch those synchronous classes as they're rolling out, those live instruction classes. We have heard over the past 6 months from multiple families about students who took months to connect to the internet or never connected to the internet over the spring and the summer. Obviously, if they never connected, there was a whole lot of work that wasn't happening there, either on their behalf or work that they were doing themselves. We heard from others, a lot of families in shelter, for example, that, sorry, okay, that their connections were painfully slow, and that students got frustrated quickly and gave up on their work. Obviously, when that happens, the results are problematic and troubling. You know, if a student gets frustrated too many days in a row, the chances of them logging on the next day is greatly reduced. Literacy supports again. So the picture on the right side of the screen is the cover of a report that we put out several years ago, making recommendations for the city of New York around improving literacy instruction. We highlighted a bunch of successful programs here in New York, and I probably should have looked and seen if any of them were in CEC28, but I didn't, so forgive me for that. The recommendations we made there, some of them have led to, for example, well, we can't take full credit, but since we put that out, we have seen the universal literacy program unfold. We've seen the bumping up of the responsibilities for those IEP teachers around literacy. We've seen many more schools embracing a real effort to make sure that all of their students graduate from their programs, early childhood, middle school, and high school, more successful in literacy. But literacy, as I said before, it's the great divide between students. If a student leaves school able to read, amazing. If they don't, or if they're still struggling and barely reading, life beyond that is going to be hard. Finding the right work is going to be hard. Going on to further education is going to be tough. Applying for jobs, filling out forms is going to be hard, if not impossible. As I just said, the DOE has been building their ability to do this. I do want to say that kids can learn to read, even those who have dyslexia, even those who have learning differences, even those with some fairly profound disabilities. It's just a matter of training the teachers to train the students with evidence-based interventions that are sort of systematic and build on skill sets that students need in order to be able to read. Access to language supports is another one of these huge equity issues that we've been seeing since March, and we continue to be really concerned about. Communication and outreach in multiple languages needs to be improved. The DOE does, as I said, translate major documents into the 9 top languages, which is wonderful. But a lot of the things on the DOE's website, families are encouraged to use Google Translate. Total aside, I've been studying Spanish for the past year. I'm only so-so at it, but I do know enough that when I do my classroom assignments in Spanish and I try to cheat by using Google Translate, it never works out well. It recommends all kinds of words that are sort of inappropriate or used in the wrong way. So we really need to make sure that families who are not native English speakers or who are not proficient English speakers are being communicated with and specifically reached out to make sure that they know about the changes that are happening daily right now. Again, you know, the DOE is rolling out new information daily. Those families need it. They also need a voice. They need to have, those families need a way of speaking up, asking questions, speaking out, and being heard. There are also digital literacy issues. Well, I guess that's actually really what I was referring to about like Google Translate. So this is a really big area that needs ongoing work. Issues unique to students who are currently homeless. I talked a little bit about the internet needs. The Wi-Fi and the shelter systems remains problematic. The iPads that students were given through the DOE did have the ability to connect, but for those families that are working off of their own, it's still a huge problem. Space needs, often there are a number of people living in the same space, whether they're in the shelter or if they're doubled up or tripled up with another family. If there's another person learning 2 feet away from you, the noise, the action, the everything is unique, is sort of overwhelmingly distracting to a student. Food insecurity, I guess I didn't really need to spell this one out, but if you're hungry and you don't know when your next meal is going to be, it's really hard to pay attention to your studies. I showed you before the data about literacy in the homeless population. And then the other point here is that shelter rules often require, or always require, that if there's a student on site, there needs to be a parent on site, or a child, actually not a student. Given the need for many of the parents to be working, a lot of parents are essential workers, a lot of parents are out looking for work, a lot of parents are you know, whatever it is that takes them out of the house, if they're out, the children have to be out also. So it's extra hard for those kids to sort of follow the, without being in school, it's extra hard for them to be able to sort of attend to the schedule of school on any given day. I think this is my last substantive slide, but meeting transportation needs is obviously also huge. So for those students who will be returning to school on the 21st, yes, a lot of the populations that I've been talking with you about require busing in order to get to school. They don't get to go to their community schools for any number of reasons. So students with disabilities may travel for an appropriate specialized program, one of those only students with disabilities programs. Students in foster care often remain at the school that they were at prior to the time that they went into care for consistency purposes. Students who are homeless, same thing. You know, we don't want to sort of inflict upon them, and federal law requires that we don't, that even though everything else in their life is changing, we want there to be some consistency in school if the family opts for that. And none of that has changed with the pandemic. What has changed is that there hasn't been any busing for several months, and that the DOE is running as fast as they can to sort busing out. They just announced contracts for finalized the other day. They have announced that the bus companies have been notified of the students that will be on their routes and are figuring it out, but the families have not yet been notified of the routes that their children will be on. In non-COVID times, the families have this information several weeks before the start of the school year. Hopefully they're going to have it a week before the start of the school year, but we're getting really close to that line as we speak. In the best of years, busing has been really complicated, and we start every year on our helpline with call after call after call about busing not in place, busing in place, but the bus didn't come. The bus came, but it came too early and the family wasn't ready. The bus came, but it came too late and the family had to leave to take another child to school. Students were on the bus, but there weren't enough seats for the paraprofessionals to sit with them. Imagine all of that, and now imagine it amplified, you know, hundreds of times by the need for appropriate social distancing and safety precautions on the buses. So we imagine that a lot of the kids that depend on transportation to get to school are going to have a really hard time getting to school if they have opted for in-person instruction come the 21st. That was my last substantive slide. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to drop into the chat my email address, and not in all caps, and the link to that set of recommendations around special education that we made. And then I am really happy to answer whatever of your questions I can. Oh, I'm giving you my address, but if you're reaching out on questions about your child or a specific child, you're better off contacting our helpline. I'm gonna defer to our helpline, and I am, like all of you, I'm sure, I'm very busy these days trying to figure all of this out. So you'll get a much faster response and a much more direct response if you reach out to our helpline. So as I said, I will share the PowerPoint later. Okay, did that share?
Maggie, thank you so much for that really informative talk. That was incredibly dense.
I know.
I felt like every slide could basically be its own presentation, you know, in terms of the, you know, I've actually seen entire talks on just individual slides that you covered. So,
yeah.
So there's really a ton of information there to digest, and I don't know that we'll really be able to do that, but it's great to get an overview of sort of the equity challenges for the students in the district. I guess I would encourage folks to, you know, if you have questions for our speaker, you know, usually in our calendar meetings, we have people type, you know, speak in the chat, and then we kind of go through people's questions in order that way.
Okay.
So that's, you know, we can definitely do that. And if any of our committee members have questions, of course, you know, maybe we could lead off with some questions from committee members. Howard, go ahead.
Thanks, Ted. Maggie, thank you very much for an extremely informative presentation. I have a question submitted by one of our parents. She says that some principals are moving ICT teachers out of their classrooms to cover remote classrooms. Wondering if you've heard about this.
So the call that I was on right before this was with the Office of Special Ed. The guidance that they've issued on ICT. So ICT, for the rest of you, is integrated co-teaching. And that is where you have a full-time general ed teacher and a full-time special ed teacher working together with a class that has up to 40% of the students with IEPs. The guidance that the DOE sent to schools on ICT is, I think it's confusing. I've read it a bunch of times, but what it sets out, I'll tell you what it sets out, and then I will tell you what our concerns are. What it sets out is actually for a whole lot of staff, but sort of 3 different groups to serve each ICT class. So a pair of teachers, general ed and special ed, for the students who are learning fully remotely. And then a trio of teachers for the kids who are learning in the hybrid model, so sometime in person and sometime remote. The in-person teachers include a full-time special ed teacher and a full-time general ed teacher. The person who will be working with them remotely should be a special ed teacher, but may be a general education teacher, right? I see faces like of pure confusion, and I don't blame you. I'm still rattling this in my head. Their goal is that trio of teachers working with the kids in the hybrid mode will plan and work together. And even if the general ed teacher, even if the teacher working with the kids who are doing their remote hybrid time is a general ed teacher, that teacher will have planned with the others and will be instituting accommodations and modifications that the team planned on. We have concerns. You know, it's great if you have a team that works well together. If you have a team that doesn't, it could be really problematic. And then not to have a special ed teacher in the virtual room with the kids during their remote hybrid time. And the whole alphabet soup of schools just got that much more complicated for me with dialogue around hybrid and remote and synchronous and asynchronous. If you have teachers that aren't working well together, and if you have a teacher that's not a special education teacher as that third person in the trio, we anticipate problems. My understanding is that different schools are dealing with it different ways, and the DOE has asked schools to prioritize their special ed teachers for the specialized classrooms, those that only have students with special ed needs, and for the in-person and fully remote pairs. I'm not sure if that answers your question, partly because I'm not sure that it's an answerable question, but hopefully that brings a little more clarity to what's going on.
Well, and if I could ask a follow-up question, just to kind of put that question in sort of the overall context. So the overall context is that the traditional student-teacher ratio for K to 5 would be 32:1, you know, with in-person, and then under the new model that was announced, the in-person ratio is still capped at 32:1 for K to 5, but then for those students that are in blended learning, when they have remote learning on the other days that they're not in school, then that ratio is doubled essentially to, like, you know, 64 to 1. And,
Right.
and then for the fully remote students, they're still at a 32-to-1 ratio. So I wonder if you could sort of talk, or I wonder if you know what those, you know, what the traditional in-person types of ratios would have been for, you know, ICT and for self-contained classes, and then how that is mapping onto this blended and remote in terms of ratios, since ratios is really kind of one of the ways that they have provided high needs with more services.
Right. So the ratio in an ICT class is up to 40% of the students may have IEPs. That, in our opinion, should be true both for the remote hybrid classes and for the fully remote classes. I have heard and I have asked, but I don't have a full answer on it yet. For the, just as you said, that the remote class for the hybrid model will be a larger group of students with that one teacher who may or may not have special education certification. It is unclear to me whether it will continue to be a ratio of 40% to 60% in that group, or whether or not it'll be capped at, it's pretty much 14 students in a typical, in a typical early childhood ICT class. So I don't know if they'll cap it for those remote sessions as well at 14, or if they will be doubling that as they double the rest of it. But they cannot, by law, go above the ratio, for sure.
Okay. Are there any other committee members that have questions? Otherwise, you know, we could open it up.
No, I don't have any questions at now, Ted.
Okay.
Thanks for the presentation. Thank you.
It looks like Venus has a question. Venus, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, everyone. My biggest question and concern, as I shared in the chat, is around ACS involvement with the NYC DOE for underserved, low-income, Black and Brown communities, where, like the presenter shared, our parents are more than majority working, essential workers, different schedules, and with the late availability of childcare with whatever that program is called that the mayor spoke about with the 100,000 students, the reality is a lot of our children are not going to be able to be doing schoolwork throughout some days of the week. And in our communities, we have huge issues with pupil accounting secretaries and truancy officers calling ACS prematurely on our families because our children are not showing up, when the reality is their computer might not be able to connect to the internet, they may not have a computer, you know, they may have to use their parent's cell phone, and their parent may be at work. So is the DOE, are there any conversations about, I call it grace, a religious word, grace, but like any type of exceptions or plans for supporting these families whose children cannot get on every day, and especially may not be able to be on for the entire duration of the school day. I worked at a school, we had some students whose parents would call them for lunch, or their parent went to work at 12 o'clock and they had to leave at 12, so they might have showed up in the morning, but were not able to stay on or be present for our 1 o'clock Zoom call, because by 1 o'clock they had to take care of their siblings or they had to do other things. And having ACS, having a lot of families have been threatened that ACS will be called on them if their child doesn't log in. So minimizing those conversations, having some type of scripts or templates, or how guidance counselors, leadership speak with parents about this sensitive topic during a sensitive time, where the reality is the priority is putting food on the table for their families. So I know I went on a whole rant, but I know in the Black and Brown community, ACS threats is a common conversation. If your kid misses 2 days in a row or 3 days in a row, you'll get an email saying, if you don't show up by this time on this day, you know, we're going to have to contact. Is that in writing? And is there some exceptions and understanding around that? So again, the partnership between ACS and DOE and UFT and everything else. Thank you.
Exactly. I mean, you just said it perfectly, and we get so many calls at Advocates for Children from families that have had ACS called on them for, you know, things labeled as educational neglect that were not. And, you know, when we get involved, we can usually counter that, but not every parent can call us, and not every parent can get an advocate, you know, not just from Advocates for Children, but from anywhere involved. So yes, I said before that we have a project that is, I mean, yes, and I can't answer your question as thoroughly as I'd like to, but we do have a project that works specifically with kids in care, and they have been involved in conversations around all of that. So it is a widely recognized problem issue. All of those feel like the wrong word. Like it's so much bigger than that, but it's well recognized, and there are definitely conversations happening around that all the time. But thank you for raising it.
Thank you.
Maggie, I wanted to highlight, there were a few questions in the pre-submissions about gifted and talented students. And I just wanted to ask you, you know, I'm just, you know, I guess it comes down to sort of how you think about equity. You know, a lot of the stuff that you talked about in your presentation was about, you know, students that are even in normal times have historically struggled to meet for whatever reason, because of the, you know, clearly there's a lot of things going on in their lives, and those students have often struggled. Are gifted and talented students traditionally one of those groups?
So the work that we've done at Advocates for Children has been around attempting to ensure access to gifted and talented programs for students who are also in some of those other populations that we're working with. We have not taken on gifted and talented programming and education sort of as its own, but making sure that, for example, twice exceptional kids with disabilities who are also gifted and talented have access to those sorts of programming. I'm not going to really be able to answer your question about what's happening around G&T programming right now, although I don't see any reason why it would change. I think that, you know, any of the procedures that are being put into place through teaching and learning for students are going to apply to kids in gifted and talented programs. For us, the issue has been about making sure that all kids and not just some kids can access those programs. Yeah, and I know that's not really a direct answer to your question.
No, that's great. That's great. We have some questions in the chat. Did you all want to go ahead and ask your questions out loud? Like Veronica Wade, did you want to ask directly, or do you want me to read your question for you?
You can read it to them. Thank you.
Okay, Veronica, no problem. So the question here that Veronica writes is, can a school write in remote services in blended learning without having to modify a student's IEP? Can they just go ahead and have speech services agreed with parents, student, and the school? So in other words, can it be done informally and just write it in?
So there's not going to be if the student has a pad that, sorry, I have to keep looking up the program's adaptations document, that's going to be populated by the things that the IEP calls for. So if you're talking about right now, no, services that are not already in the IEP are not going to be arranged. Families can now, just as they always can, ask for an IEP meeting and change the IEP. More frequently, what we hear is the flip of that question, where schools decide that Maggie doesn't need speech and language anymore, and they call my parents and tell them, you know, hey, we're going to take this off of her IEP, and it's not a fully informed conversation. But one of the things that I tell folks when I train on your question is that if it's not in the IEP, it's not secure. If it's in the IEP, then there still may be a compliance issue, right? You know, you can, if you feel like it, you can go back and look at the required public reporting on the delivery of special ed services, and you'll see that New York City is is getting better. They're definitely trending in the right direction, but there are lots of kids who require special ed services that aren't getting what their IEPs already call for. So to ask for a service that isn't even on the IEP is probably not going to ultimately be a very successful approach.
Speech is on my daughter's IEP, but it's once a week. So I opted to have that remotely done as opposed to pulling her out of blended learning, you know, for the 2 days that she's in this, you know, during the week, during the school year.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Sorry, I misunderstood the question.
Yeah, it was just once a week for speech, so I opted to have it remotely done.
Right, right, and you should. I mean, your daughter's provider should be contacting you if they haven't yet, and discussing how that's going to happen and when it's going to happen and where it's going to happen.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Sorry.
You know, if anyone else, I know we have some school staff on the line as well. If anyone else has questions, feel free to, you know, type speak in the chat so we know that they're interested. There's another parent, Ariana Palacio. Did you want to ask your question out loud about the ratios? Or I can read it as well. She writes that just for clarification, for 100% remote learning students, the class size will not exceed 32:1, but for blended learning, it could be as high as 64:1. And I believe the answer to that question is yes for the remote portion of your week. So if you're going into school, you know, 2 days a week in person, and then you have 3 days of remote, the 3 days of remote could be as high as, you know, essentially it's like a double class size in terms of that particular teacher. That's the guidance that I've seen.
Right. With a certain amount of time required direct live instruction for that remote teaching period.
And Maggie, I don't know if your group has done any sort of budgetary analysis, but I know CEC members have been a little bit confused as to how all these numbers are going to work, even for just regular students, because if you're taking, you know, the remote learning, the 100% remote learning students are at 32:1. The blended students are, you know, essentially you're taking like the in-person teacher is basically only teaching half the class for 2 days a week, and then the other 3 days of the week they're teaching the other half of the class. So that's like, you know, that might be like 10 or 14 kids on each day, and so, but essentially still that same teacher. And so what it seems to be doing to the school budgets is it's requiring this new blended teacher that teaches at a 64:1 ratio. That's a position that never really existed before. And I guess I'm just wondering, like, especially in terms of when we talk about IEP students where there are specific ratio requirements, how does that all work out on school budgets? I mean, how are they able to afford all this additional staffing?
Right. I mean, we are not budget experts. We do have similar concerns. It's one of the reasons that we need funding from, you know, we need the money from the state that we've been promised all these years, and the money from the federal government. The special ed services, all I can tell you is that they are a mandate and they are an entitlement. And if a student has special ed needs and they need those services in order to make progress in school, then the DOE's got to find a way to do it. I'm as confused as you are about how they're going to be doing this. And I've heard rumors that they're scrambling to make new hires. I don't know if those are new hires to replace people that are leaving the system or if they're new and additional hires.
Great. We have another question here from Sonia Sakrani. Sonia, do you want to ask your question?
Ted, you can go ahead and ask the question. Thank you.
Okay. So Sonia asks, how are paraprofessionals going to be with kids who are in 100% remote learning? And will the paraprofessional be with them during all their services?
So as I understand it, Sonia, if the family has opted for 100% remote, then the para will be remotely working with them also. They won't be there in person because remote is remote, but they will continue to support the students in various ways. You know, if they're helping the students attend to work, they'll be there. They'll be a part of the conversation and a part of the interaction through the remote learning. And if they are 100%, you know, if they're with the children all the time that the child's in school, they are going to be with the child remotely all the time, but they will not be in person.
Okay, from what I have heard, they were saying that any child who is in 100% remote learning would probably not get a paraprofessional from that school, and they would just get someone off the DOE. They would just get someone from the DOE, basically someone who randomly they don't know. And the child who has actually been with the paraprofessional for the past, whatever, 1, 2, 3 years, you know, for them to just be given a new paraprofessional who they don't know, who they've never met, never communicated. How does that actually work? Because this is what I'm hearing from the schools that, you know, and parents are actually.
Yeah. Have you heard it from multiple schools or from specific schools? Because I have a feeling that's something that's going to depend school by school.
Well, I've heard it randomly from a couple of teachers. I've heard it randomly from 1 or 2 schools. And so that's why, you know, everything is confusing. And
Yes.
Parents want to know. Parents want to know, how is this whole process going to take place? Will their child be with that same para? Will they not? Because from what I understand, the paraprofessionals who actually are going to school, they are actually going to be with the kids, and those who've obviously got accommodation for working from home, they will be given to any random child.
I think that there's a good chance of that. There are definitely schools that that switch paras year to year anyway, unfortunately. I agree with you that the relationship between the student and a para that they know is really important. I'm guessing it's going to look different school by school, and I think that you're right that without knowing the number of paras that have applied themselves for accommodations in order to work remotely, there's going to be some reconfiguring.
Right.
And the best advice that I can give parents is that when they have the conversation with their teachers about their PAD, right? Their programs, adaptations, document. I should just pin it on my computer. That they should explicitly start a conversation about that, not just para generic, but I want my para Sonia, you know, I want my para, you know, that's been working with my child for the past few years. It may not be feasible, but it's a conversation that should definitely be explored. And I completely understand why parents are worried.
Yeah, because from what I understand, the paras who are in school, they will not be with those children who are doing 100% remote. They have to be physically with a child who is in school.
That's right.
And so then that same child who had that para for 2 years does not get that para, completely new para. And so parents are just worried because their children have already regressed. And then to throw another new para to them, where the child does not even know the para, it's a little bit more, I feel it's overwhelming for the child.
I agree.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for that comment, bringing some real, lived experience from the district. That was very helpful.
Yeah.
I see someone by the name of Bird that wants to ask a question. Go ahead.
Good evening. I'm the parent coordinator, and I just have a question. It may not be an intelligent question, but it's just something I was curious about.
I'm sure it's an intelligent question.
Okay. For the students that go on remote, and the remote teacher that's teaching them, can they have various students from different grades in one class with one teacher? Is there a limit? Like, can you have third, fourth, and fifth grade, or second, third, fourth, and fifth grade in one class remotely with one teacher?
No. I have not heard that proposed. There are schools that have bridge classes. So they have classes with students from multiple grades in them. But unless that is the school's model, remote instruction should be provided by a teacher covering the grade for which the student is in. I mean, you said you're a parent coordinator, so it's possible that the school that you were at had one of those programs that bridged grades.
Yes, they do have a bridge class, but I just wanted to know, can a bridge class consist of, let's say, kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth? Or should it just be maybe third and fourth, or fourth and fifth?
It's usually 2 years. It's usually just a 2-year span. Is your school a District 75 school?
No, it's not.
Okay, then it should be 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, it's a 3-year expand. It's 3 years.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Looks like Barbara Williams from our equity committee. Go ahead, Barbara.
Hi, good evening. Thank you all for coming. So my son just told me to ask a question. He wants to know if during remote learning, will he be getting lessons from one of his teachers that he know, or will it be a stranger, a new teacher that he doesn't know?
It's going to depend who's coming back to in person and who's doing the remote instruction. Is he in a general ed class, or is he in an ICT class?
He's in a general ed class. He has an IEP, but it's not for, it's just for something else.
Okay.
He's in the general ed class. Starting last year, he was changed over to general ed. But he just tell me to ask that question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and I understand why he's curious. You know, without knowing whether or not the person that so we have to speak in sort of like many timelines, right? You know, the person who would have been his teacher, whether they're in school or working remotely, and you know, when the classes have been divided. So I think it's going to be, you know, you should, if you haven't gotten your grade assignments yet, not grade assignments, class assignments yet, you should know the answer to that shortly.
Okay, he says thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So Maggie, I have another question. Oh, actually, it looks like Principal Hasbury Signal has a question. Go ahead, Principal.
Thank you. I actually didn't have a question. I just wanted to, I'm one of the principals that are in the room. Thank you for having this forum. I'm glad to be a part of it. I'm so proud of District 28. I'm hearing all of the anxiety that a lot of the parents are feeling, and I want you to know that we are with you. We feel the same anxiety, and there are so many different scenarios that are happening, and we are trying our very, very best to align everything that your child needs, whether you choose to stay at home or whether you choose to come into a building under a blended setting. You cannot imagine the task of contacting parents, communicating with parents, and a lot of those questions can be answered by your specific principal. We have staff changes daily, up into the hour. So then a program may have to change. So I know that Central and New York City Department of Ed and our superintendent office, Dr. Pate, they all have been working to provide support for the principals to use their own discretion, as well as to make sure that safety is first. The first thing that's going to happen is your child, if you have chosen blended instruction, you will have a certified teacher in front of you. We have received specific guidelines as to what ICT is to look like, how it's supposed to be inside the building, what is it going to look like remotely. And I can tell you that our planning is within the forefront of making sure that we are in compliance with the law. And it's nothing like when you open up your email and one of your staff members have gotten sick or have gone on an accommodation, you have to rush and find another staff member. And there could be individuals that are deployed throughout the city, but they are all licensed pedagogues. So there are a lot of activities that are happening next week that teachers will be reaching out to families directly and introducing themselves, doing learning experiences with your child to say, this is the start of the school year, this is new for us. We've done so many different professional learning communities on de-escalation within the building, trauma informed, like everybody, even the adults have experienced some trauma. Like we have to be there for each other and we have to pack our patience because it is a flexible system and it is changing rapidly right in front of us. So we can't wait to meet the students again and just make that contact. Some parents chose blended and now they want to go 100% remote because of some of the statistics that they're hearing. So please, if you have some specific questions, I know my colleagues, we're answering emails, we're using our personal cell phones, we are sending out community newsletters, we're doing multiple town halls. Please utilize that time so you can get some accurate, real-to-date information on how your principal is aligning the leadership and advocacy of your children, because this is wonderful that we're talking about our children in South Jamaica, whether you're on near the Grand Central or whether you're near Merrick Boulevard. We all count and we wanna do the right thing. And that just keeps changing over and over and over again. So your first line of defense is your principal. That way you can get some real up-to-date information and give them time to respond to you, right? Because we know it can't happen in 15 minutes. It's got to be within 24 hours for us to be able to respond to you. But a lot of those questions can be answered accurately and reflect what's truly happening in that specific building, because every building is different. Thank you for giving me that moment, and I thank
you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yes, and I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think we all recognize just how complex this planning task is, that, you know, the guidance from Central has been coming out even just, you know, at the end of the month, and having to essentially pivot and change your plans as a principal. I know that cannot be easy in any way.
If you don't mind, Mr. Chang, I see some of the questions are asking, how are related services happening in the building? And they are happening because the staff is inside the building. If that staff member who would have provided it in the building is out on leave, then there will be another staff member that Central will send us. Or if, let's use speech, for example, if you have a child that receives speech, then the speech supervisor will align that up based on our needs, because the principal will know that, and we will make sure that your child receives the same services. Okay, so I see that one of the other questions, well, how will 504 accommodations? Those are all legal documents. If we don't know something, we have so many people that we can touch to find an answer to, whether it's reaching out to another colleague, calling our District 28 Superintendent's office. We will make sure that those accommodations, if your child's in the building, it has to happen. If your child is remote, well, then we have to look at it together, to look at it and examine to see, hey, how can we make this happen remotely? That's our jobs. We are problem solvers, and it is driving all of us crazy because there are no right answers. Like, we wake up to be like, okay, how can we solve problems? This is how we love to do it, and we love to do it for our students, but sometimes there's not a solution. So communication is the key, and there's nothing that can happen right away, right now in the pandemic. It just can't. What can happen is we can do a touch and make contact, and then we can discuss and we can do follow-up. But we're all are working to make sure that we're following the law and making sure we're following the CDC, the Department of Health, and making sure that we're saving lives as well as educating them. Like, I can tell you that that is happening.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. And I'm here for any other questions. There are other principals that are in the room. If you guys want to talk, I don't want to hog the time. I know Dr. Pate is there, but we can speak to some of the things that we're in support of with the advocacy group.
Yeah, I think that we're very aligned on a lot of issues.
Yes.
Yeah, and obviously, like, with all the guidance changing so frequently, you know, the communication task gets a lot more complicated, because then parents hear something, and then the principal themselves may be, you know, changing the programming in real time, and then having to communicate with that with the parents. There's a lot of, you know, there's just a lot of back and forth there. So so we appreciate you know, our principals and staff and their willingness to really, you know, keep in touch with parents and let people know what's going on. I appreciate that you answered another question in the chat. And I saw earlier that Principal Kelly from PS 174 had raised her hand. So go ahead, Principal. Oh, you're on mute.
All right, I got it. I want to just say to everyone in the audience that Dr. Pate has provided the guidance and leadership and contact with us through every step of this process. It's a little difficult because the word that comes on the news is very different than the actual work that we need to do. Every day, our teachers returned, our staff returned yesterday. And now we are in process of changing the groups, assigning the groups. And it seemed like everyone believes that today was the first day. They're forgetting that we changed that, even if it was communicated. They're waiting to hear their new teachers. The teachers need to be programmed and assigned. Dr. Pate is making sure and communicating with the special ed department in Queens South to see what our needs are, what teachers we need, what sets providers, what remote, who in person, and really filling in these gaps. So please know that it is going to take a little time now, bringing transportation into the mix, but we still have time to be working these things out. And just know that all of the behind the scenes, countless hours is happening. I'm happy to be here tonight.
And I know many of you are not getting nearly as much sleep as you deserve. I wanted to ask Maggie a question. I noticed at our last calendar meeting that there was a really interesting slide that showed the different instructional models, or the different schedule models, I guess you would call them, that the different schools in District 28 had selected. And I thought it was really interesting. It was sort of across the board. You know, there were 3, 4, or 5 schools that had selected almost each model. You know, the models were, you know, like do all, you know, have 5 days of in-person and 5 days of remote, or have 2 days of in-person and then 3 days of remote. So there are various models based on scheduling. I did find it very interesting from sort of an equity, just sort of raising an equity question. I did find it very interesting that, like, I think there were 6 schools that selected models 4B and 5B. And those models are a little bit different than the models that most of the schools have chosen. Those models seem to have a third cohort, cohort C, that is programmed for 5 days of in-person. And Maggie, I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that in terms of like why that model would exist,
So that third cohort is for the kids with it. Those are models for District 75 programs, and those are models that allow for some of the kids with the highest needs to be in school every day if they need to.
And is that only for District 70? Like, because I think those were adopted by, schools in District 28. So
Are they schools that are co-located with District 75 programs?
I can speak for my school. I did select that model with parental input, and we do not have a D75 program. However, we worked with our parent coordinators, our district leaders, Sonia Rueda. We had so many different town hall meetings, and we did a think tank together to find out what the parents needed. Our parents illustrated that it was so confusing to be able to go to their boss and say, hey, I need to have this day off, and next week, this day off. It wasn't gonna work for those that needed to work. And so we looked at the feedback. We had to apply for an exception because that was originally for D75 schools, but it was an option for other elementary schools to apply for that. So PS 140 is one of the schools that applied for that, and it was approved. Thank you, Dr. Pate. And we needed that consistency for the parent as well as for the students to sit 5 consecutive days for a full day of instruction, and then the next week you go remote, hopefully with the same teacher. We're in the midst of programming, but that is our goal, to mirror them, that the work that we did when we were face-to-face together, it's just a continuation of school at home. School didn't stop. We're just not in brick and mortar, but we're going to continue that. So that's why we chose that. That's what our families wanted, and that's what they needed. And that's why we chose that as a team.
I'm really excited to hear that they approved it also.
Yes. Well, Dr. Pate can speak to that because that was a very lengthy process.
Thank you, Dr. Pate.
Yeah, Dr. Pate, would you like to comment, not just on PS 140, but maybe some of the other schools as well that selected that model?
If you want me to share that screenshot of the schools and the models they selected, I'm happy to do that as well. So every school across the New York City Department of Education was responsible for engaging parents across all 5 models and making a decision collaboratively around what model best served the needs of their community. In some cases, there were models like the 4th and 5th model having an AB section, but those were designated for District 75 and other learning settings. But principals could apply for exceptions if families felt that that was the model that best suited their need. And so I think that was this process. I think we did a lot. To me, this was one of the most effective process in terms of schools selecting a model that best suits the needs of the larger majority of their school. Principal Signal as well as Principal Kelly has talked about how challenging it has been to then program that model, given the fact that we are still changing sort of the remote learning options, and we are also being updated daily, hourly, in terms of the medical accommodation. But that was a process that every school engaged in. I pulled a district review team of 22 people who, using multiple rubrics, and a folder of documents that every school, they knew that it was a non-starter if they had not engaged their family and community in the decision-making process. And so they knew coming in that they needed to show evidence. They had not just shared the models with families, but collected feedback and made adjustments before they presented and defended their model. And so that has been done for every single school. In fact, we have one school, because of the amount of teachers who are on medical accommodation, is actually getting ready to resubmit to select a different model because they 75–80% of their teachers are on medical accommodation. So you can imagine what that looks like in-house. And how this principal is going to run her school. There's another one, another principal, he is a middle school, and he's also having a similar issue. About 75–80% of the staff are teaching remotely. So it has been a very challenging. I don't want to overplay that, but I can tell you that the average vacation time that principals have had since March 13th is about 3 days. And so I don't expect the mini violin, but I want you to understand that the work that has gone into readiness for the school year has been significant. We don't take it lightly. I absolutely don't take it lightly and won't allow anyone else to, with regard to having community and parent engagement in this process. Have you noticed I've been monitoring my airtime tonight?
Thank you, Dr. Pate. Well, I just noticed we're sort of running up against time here. So I wanted to thank all of our principals and Dr. Pate and other school staff who have participated and answered questions. We really appreciate your attendance. And I also wanted to thank Maggie for a really informative presentation. I feel like there was so much information, and I'm not sure we really did justice to it, because we could really have spent a whole meeting just on individual slides. But this was a great sort of inaugural kickoff for the Equity Committee. And so I think this will be a great start to having these types of conversations. And just before we wrap up, do any other committee members, Howard, Barbara, Erica, does anyone else have a question or comment that they'd like to?
Just wanted to thank Maggie again and everyone attending, and thank you, Ted, for organizing.
Thank you. So again, thank you, everyone. And this is going to be a regular thing. We're going to try to, have different speakers. Please, if you have ideas for speakers, we're really just trying to dig in. It can be very difficult at the calendar meeting because we leave a lot of time for public comment, and a lot of time, there are always so many pressing issues. So the committee meetings are a chance for us to get a little bit deeper into the policy issues and talk about questions that may not get, as much time in the calendar meeting. So please, if you have ideas for equity issues in the district that you want us to cover, please submit those ideas on the equity page of our website, and we will try to program speakers and conversations around some of those ideas. So again, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Maggie, for a great presentation. I will post the presentation on the website later for those who want to see a hard copy of it. Great.
Thanks again for inviting me.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Hey, Howard.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just want to say Sage is in the house.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Oh,
Good
it's a
night, all.
baby. Where? A baby.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Take care. Maggie, thank you so much for your presentation. It was really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That
Very
means a
much
lot coming
Great
from you.
information.
Thank you.
Yes.
Very, very helpful. And I would love to be able to do some workshops for our families in South Jamaica. Please reach out, because I think that a lot of people just don't know where to go when they're looking for someone to fight with them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So please.
I did put my my email address in, and I will send it when I send Ted the presentation.
Thank you.
And if you guys want to reach out, I'm not, everybody on our staff does presentations, and everybody is good. So we will find you somebody for sure.
Great.
Wonderful.
Thank you so
We'll
much.
be in
Thank
touch.
you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Have a good
Bye,
night.
everybody. Have a good night.
Good
Night, all.
Goodbye.